Dzień dobry. Szanowni Państwo, będziemy zaczynali drugi panel kongresu.
Hello everyone, we are about to start the second panel of today's Congress.
Witam Państwa, witam także osoby,
Please take your seats. Welcome everyone, on-site and off-site.
Jest też możliwość dyskusji online.
If you are online, you can also ask a question, share an opinion using our chat. My smartphone is right in front of me, so I can follow your questions and I can read your questions out to our speakers. My name is Piotr Choroś. I'm with the Municipal office of Lublin. Although I don't deal with greenery in particular, I'm in charge of participation affairs. We'll talk about green cities and space planning based on participation processes. We will try to combine two major trends in public administration of today, which is co-deciding, co-governing or co-governance, and participation of residents in decision-making. And the other trend is taking care of natural environment, looking more towards the role of greenery, vegetation in the city. And we will have a look at how these trends overlap and is there any tension between these two areas and what can come out of it and what results it may produce for cities in our countries. And our panelists today are, let me start with our online guests. Monika Pec-Święcicka, Municipal Landscape Architect from Wrocław. Zurab Nasaraya, head of the Guria Region Sustainable Development Association from Georgia. Hello.
Okay. Witam. A z nami na żywo w Lublinie.
And here in the room we have with us
pozwolę sobie wymienić pani
Katarzyna Przyjemska-Grzesik, head of the Cracow in Green project from Cracow, of course. Mariia Borysova, project manager from Misto-sad. It's an NGO from Ukraine.
Oraz moja koleżanka z Urzędu Miasta Lublin, miejska architekt zieleni, pani
and Hanna Pawlikowska, my colleague from the Municipal office. Hanna is a greenery architect. Our meeting is being interpreted simultaneously into Russian and English. Therefore, you might experience slight delays in our transmission. I hope this will not disturb this meeting dramatically, but because of interpretation, we can access a greater audience. These two trends that I named a moment ago, taking care of greenery and participation, they have been surfacing in discussions with residents for a number of years. And Polish cities, for a number of years, have implemented various ways to invite residents to a dialogue on what greenery should be like in the city. In many cities, there are projects and competitions to design greenery in the city. There are also methods to discuss greenery designs, initiatives with residents. I mean, the design of new plazas, squares, parks. And there are also ways to encourage residents to suggest where new greenery should be put and how to take care of it. And I believe this is what we can discuss today, and I'm happy to hear from you. Let me start with our first presentation. We have 3 presentations in this segment, each covering 10 to 15 minutes. I will keep the track of time, I promise this. Then we will refer to what we have seen in the presentations and then maybe share some experience or best practice from Polish cities. Let me start with the presentation from Mariia from Ukraine. Mariia is here with us in Lublin.
Hi everyone. So my name is Mariia and I'm presenting experience of the NGO. I'm working in Kiev. You see, today I'll talk about how we make the community involvement through art and urban planning practices. Okay, so everything started for our organization after the revolution in Ukraine, the Maidan revolution, and basically history of our organization started from creating a garden. And it was a great start for us, and since then we work with public spaces, we work with different communities around Ukraine, eastern part, Kiev, and we make exhibitions, we make public space projects and educational courses, but the main idea is both art and public spaces projects are instruments for us. So they are not the aim themselves. We use art and we use different public space projects to unite communities and to unite people around some idea or some practices. So a few words about the context. I'm sure you've seen in some post-Soviet cities that there may be some spaces which are not locations yet. And I'm not sure who specifically, but there is an idea that location is a place where something took place, like something happened, there was some action or there was some event. And in Kiev and other Ukrainian cities and villages, after the modernist urban planning, we have lots of land and places in cities even covered with grass or some bushes, but they are still like not a place because people don't use them. And this is a huge problem for us because while the climate change and while the economical situation, people really have lots of needs in their leisure and in having clean air in their cities. And still we have those green zones which are not used anyhow. And so we try to change it, and in our projects we also take like people to look on them and to somehow rethink them, how they can use them. What is also interesting is that only 7.5% of Ukrainian citizens consider to be actively involved in some community workings. Still, people find NGOs very important, which is interesting because in Ukraine, especially after the revolution, mostly NGOs somehow copy what the government should do, and somehow the country and the government, the state itself, doesn't work properly in some areas, and then the NGOs come and say, hi, we can do that, and maybe we can do it more efficient than you. So in this situation, NGOs are kind of a link between some activities of the state or city-level government and the people. So we also do it. And the third point of the context is that people, unfortunately, don't know how they can be involved. So I can see a garden or I can see some green space, but I cannot be sure whether I can change it. What do I need to know to change it? And sometimes people don't feel responsible for spaces around them. So this is also an issue we work with. And I'm here to tell you about 2 projects. One of them will be an example of how we work on the topic of urban planning. and it is an involvement and about artistic projects. So first project is called the Misto-sad for communities. We worked with 4 communities in eastern part of Ukraine. It's not the space where the war is now going on, but it's like nearby. So in terms of that project, we needed to create projects of public spaces. And here on a slide, you can see several stages of all the activities we organized together with the representatives of those communities. So it wasn't like we came to them and asked them for their opinion and it was the involvement. No way. Like from step to step, we did it together. And it was the main point of all the project. Even the SWOT analysis, even the surveys, we did it together with the locals. And here is a beautiful picture our architect made up about the public space in Vyshneva village. And now you'll see what's now in the place of it. It's a bit different, huh? But you know what? I'm really glad with this result, because what you see is what the community did themselves. So it wasn't us who found money for them. It wasn't us who made it for them. This is their result, and they did it. They did this work. And for example, they planted more than 30 bushes and trees after our projects. Yeah, I mean, it differs from this picture, but this is what they did themselves. And I would like to add here that that involvement which took place was a real empowerment, because afterwards community became more independent. They gained the experience of how to work with this location. They gained experience of how to even discuss their ideas and to come to the results. So I'm glad with it. And another project, my favorite one, it was called Art in a School Garden. So we selected 5 schools from more than 90 who applied for the program. And as you see on the pictures, like one is a model that kids done and another is like screenshot. There's still a tradition of lots of space around the school. And usually schools and pupils, they don't use it. So they see it, but they don't spend time there. They don't communicate with those greeneries and trees. And once again, it's some green part which is not in any use. And therefore, kids also don't understand if they are value, if they can develop it somehow, because there is a distance, because there is no like practice of using. And so we wanted to create 5 exhibitions in 5 schools, and the kids were curators and artists themselves. So what we done is only organized the work, organized the terms in which they could make those exhibitions. So here are some pictures from the exhibitions themselves. You can see, for example, on the left picture, yeah, there is like a real garden, huge garden. And when we took some of the constructions over there, it changed everything, because we marked this place like, guys, you can use it, you can be there, you can be the ones who co-create this space. And our architect made this polyfunctional constructions for exhibitions. They stayed for nowadays in schools for them to use it more and more. And here are some results about our impact. So we made a survey between the kids who took part in that project. And as you see, mostly kids who respond to the survey told like, yeah, we're really now looking for this territory in a different way. And yeah, we understand it can have some opportunities, not only just green space. And there is a quotation of one of the teachers, and she told me, yeah, but we did organize some events over there, but we never did it on the level like with you. And she told, like with you, we learned how to use the space. And I'm really glad to hear that. So to conclude about involvement, what I think is that in those examples I've told you, we have involvement which leads to empowerment. And for our organization, involvement is not only 1-2 time questions. Involvement for us is not one-time questionnaire. And involvement is not one time come to discussion and give us what you think. It's a great process of being together with community, not only to understand their needs, but also to give them perspective how they can do it further themselves. And so here are some stages of what we want to grow in the representatives of the community we work with, and those feelings, I marked them like I have connection to this place, or I see it valuable, and I have a right to co-create it, and then I know how to use it in such a way that community will benefit. So also we provided them with some instruments, and I know how to manage it. So in our practice, involvement, especially in the topic of how we can make cities green, it starts with raising the awareness of the importance of green zones. Even if it's 3 trees or 4 bushes, it's still important, especially while the climate changes. And especially in the COVID times, because people can't spend time indoors all the time. They need some outdoors, which would be a really comfortable place. And after having understanding of that green space may be valuable, it is important for us to get people involved in rethinking what they can do, what they can make in this place for themselves to benefit, for community benefit. And art practices are also one of the instruments for it, because they fulfill their space with the result of some actions which were taken between the people together. And urban planning, maybe it wasn't that obvious an example of first project, but still, even while community is discussing one exact location, and while they are discussing, okay, maybe we need a chair over here or over here, still they start to feel themselves responsible and to feel a right to this place, to feel a right to propose what do they need or do not need there. And this is how we provide this involvement. That's all.
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much. During the presentation, I just noted down some questions to and issues that I would like to have some more detail from you after all the presentations. One of the things I would like to focus on, to stress, we could see in the presentation was the link to another panel of ours about the youth participation, and there will be a presentation, a speech about inclusion of the youth and children in designing urban space. So I think we can successfully combine the two. But let us leave aside the questions and have them after the presentations. Now, we have learned the Ukrainian perspective, NGO's perspective. This is very, very valuable for us. And now let's have Georgia to have their experiences presented. Mr. Zurab Nasaraya, please present your experiences in this regard. Hello.
Я Зураб Насарая, недавно еще был губернатором Гурийского региона, а в настоящее время я...
Hello and welcome, ladies and gentlemen. I'm a representative of a consortium for tourism development in the region, combining more than 10,000 organizations in the industry. From the Guria region, the goal is to establish the Guria Green region. In 2020, we start the project to last until 2022, a pilot program for the comprehensive development of the region. This project is based on the EU regional development policy with the objective to cooperate and strengthen the sustainable development in the region via comprehensive territorial instruments. The program is coordinated by the Ministry of Infrastructure of Georgia within the Regional Development Committee. The program covers 4 regions, including Guria, that I'm representative of. As for our region, it features over 20 tourism-related programs covering 3 local government units, more than 2,000 square kilometers, with 54,000 people. What's different about Guria? Now we've got some specific climate, territory, coastline, and mountains as well. We've got the climate gives different opportunities for development of agriculture, tourism, both at sea and in the mountainous areas, with agritourism being an option, adventure seekers, but also vineyard tourism. So in the Black Sea regions, there are a lot of interesting places for the tourists. Also, economically speaking, there are producers of nuts, for instance, minerals, mineral clay, brick-making clay, very good transport connections, international roads, international railway connection, and the airport in Batumi. We have established central waste management system to prevent pollution of the coastline. Close to the coastline, we've got nets to catch out any contamination, any waste, rubbish that can be. There are waste treatment tanks installed in the shore area. So we ranked 3rd in the competition for the least polluted cities in the country. We are considering different options for forest management and forest waste management. The objective is to develop the circular economy so that any waste generated can be reprocessed, reused.
Что еще больше увеличит количество зеленых насаждений в регионе. Также восстанавливается.
We are also involved in projects to rebuild natural resources. We actually pursuing projects for establishment, development of natural reserves. Lanchvulti is a protected area. To give you an example, there's a national park located in the
дендрологический парк, который недавно создали с частными инвестициями.
Of course, we have the man-made culture of over 60 hectares of forests with unique tree species, carefully selected, well designed. And in the mountain resort Chechpori, we established kind of areas of this national park. So with this, we develop the regional development plan for Guria as the green region. So these are the first steps that we make to make it happen, to make it reality. And this should actually combine well with the policy to expand the greenery areas in the region. So we work together with the heavy industry companies who want to contribute to the growth of the region. They support us, but also there are companies that are interested in getting waste materials to reprocess. And we also count on cooperation with NGOs, just like us. And the pilot program that I mentioned is funded from the European Union funds. And it's important that local government units take part in these projects. These projects, again, are oriented to the green organic development, social development, the business management, sustainable development. By these we mean decentralized approach to pursue these projects. So we've got the consultation boards at the regional and local government levels. The boards are composed city councillors, NGOs, and people from the business sector. So actually this fits well in the regional policy-making standards of the EU, and with that the cooperation with the European Union helps us achieve a kind of next step in terms of quality of management. We can gain trust in the EU and confidence from the EU. So to wrap up my presentation, thank you very much, and stay healthy. All the best wishes to you.
Regionalnych działaniach związanych z przyrodą, zielenią, z perspektywy Gruzji, przede wszystkim perspektywy regionu. Zapisałem sobie
So again, I noted down a couple of questions, so I will ask you the questions after all the presentations. So this is the international context, but now we are in Lublin, in Poland. So let's move on to the experiences of the Lublin cities. We've got Wrocław and Monika Pec-Święcicka, who is with us online, to speak about Wrocław experiences as regards participation in green planning in the cities. So the floor is yours. Hello, everyone. Can you hear me? Yes. Let me just share my presentation with you.
Chciałam podzielić się z Państwem
I would like to share
informacją o tym, jak
some information with you about the impact on designing the urban greenery areas from social participation, both formalized participation under law or informal participation
ten udział społeczny
as
potrafi zmieniać
how the social participation can change cities,
doświadczam tego w ciągu
how
ostatnich
it can change urban environment. I have seen over the last 10 years a lot of changes, and I'm passionate about green areas, and I was positively surprised with the changes.
Mieliśmy miejsce właśnie w 2018
It was back in 2018 when the new
studium tym pojawiła się
spatial zoning
polityka ochrony przyrody
preliminary plan
zieleni,
was presented.
ochrony bioróżnorodności, radykalne zwiększenie
There was a focus put on the protection of biodiversity, integration of greeneries in the city zone planning processes. It was a kind of different approach that the city took to spatial planning. As a result, I must say, of the social protests that had happened
zieleni nazwano zielenią
regarding the preliminary the plan.
We Wrocławiu mamy 50
So it's 58% of the total area of the Wrocław city that's covered with green the areas, but only 35% of the areas actually owned by the municipality. So it points to the need actually to think how it interacts with building developments, how it interacts with the protection instruments, so that regardless of the building plans, this 58% of the greenery in total can be preserved and conserved.
Formę zieleni bez granic przyjęto poprzez wprowadzenie
So
strefy.
we introduced zones, greenery zones, the protected zones, that is river valleys, parks, forests, with protective functions, with recreative functions, with the functions of the lungs of the city, so as to provide for the proper quality of life in the city. We adopted subsequent policies, 16 in total, to ensure the delivery on these plans. We prepared the plans for the residential and utility greenery areas, so as to make the greenery areas closer to the buildings. What was essential was the co-creating greenery areas for the economic development zones. And the economic zones includes industrial areas, post-industrial areas, and agricultural zones. This is the specific character of Wrocław. About 18% of the land is the agricultural land, so it was essential. The greenfield investments were accompanied by greenery areas as a must, as a prerequisite, as a requirement, so as to prevent land degradation and maintain the greenery continuity. So the policies I mentioned are kind of zone-specific for protection zones, but also for residential areas, community areas, individual housing areas, and economic and utility areas. This preliminary plan somehow continued in the final spatial zoning plans. So I just wanted to demonstrate how important it is to continue to maintain the consistency in the design, in the planning, just to show you how the greenery is actually next to us. So the owners of the land, of the areas, are not 100% free to decide where the greenery should be, but depends on the spatial zoning plan that provides for protection under special zoning arrangement, the protected areas, and so on. In detail, there are greenery cards or sheets, so to say, that need to be developed for 48 residential areas. It's Oślice areas, that is the latest development in this regard, with social participation, community participation, also covering all these conflict points, conflict between the specific communities or conflicts with the developers, so as to provide for a comprehensive greenery network for the area itself. The consultations, social consultations are held for each document to be passed. This was the case with the adaptation plan for good climate that was held in with a very constructive but also critical approach to the zone planning. We gathered several dozens of climate-related indicators or metrics to be included in taken account of in decision making. I just picked up one of the greenery metric that is in line with the EU requirements and standards, but also based on some basis that may be inconvenient for the city or maybe risky to the cities. But this is the point. The city needs to take into account these issues in the proper planning. So another metric, range of metrics was given into account in the coming zoning plan amendments. These were developed with involvement of the community, and with this social pressure, the city decided to propose a bigger number of the indicators and increase the weight of the metrics in decision making. So greenery extension plan is quite a new document that the city of Wrocław is developing with social participation. So we couldn't simply neglect community participation. So the first work we did was involve the experts and community organizations. So that is their voice that is that has the biggest say in the process. So in social consultation process was fully fledged, including participation from the community. We wanted to win the awareness and consent and approval from the community. So based on expert voices, based on consultations with AGOs, based on, well, just joint walks, exercises, tree planting events. We visit the communities, we learn what's most important for the residents. We learn how the city can support their ambitions, their initiatives, how to work together. Because, mind you, the city councils, simply can't be as effective as, commonly expected. The number of the officials, the number of councillors is limited. The role of the councillors, the role of the authorities is to activate people, is to raise awareness of their, responsibilities in these decision-making processes. So the question was, what are the residents expecting from the city in terms of extension of the greenery areas? One of the aspects is the green education, so that people know how to
I najważniejszymi aspektami, które właśnie
do
pojawiły
it,
się
how to
podczas konsultacji tego planu zazieleniania jest
extend the
przede
greenery.
wszystkim ochrona istniejącej ziemi.
So
Mieszkańcy
the
buntują
first
się
point
przeciwko
raised
sprzedaży
was the
działek
protection of the
do
existing
budowania,
greeneries.
bez refleksji nad tym, jaką
The
mamy zastaną zieleń. Szczególnie,
communities actually protest
dotyczy to terenów,
degreening of
bądź, hydrogenicznych,
the residential
wartościowych
areas.
pod kątem gospodarowania wodami, także zadrzewionych. ale
Water
i
management,
tereny otwarte są dla
meadows and open areas. So communities protest against building them up by developers. Also, with the greening strategies, there's a limitation on the building construction for new residential areas, for the establishment of new green parks. And this is something that is going to be changed in the new zoning plan amendment, that is extension of the city gardens. The existing gardens will be maintained, and the communities expect them to open up so that they provide recreational facilities for general public, if only in part. So that is a publicly available space. Also, communities raised the small green areas. That is revitalization of small parks, of the yards, including them in the city routes and so on. Another stage will be the project that is funded by the Ministry of the Environment to kind of evaluate and audit Wrocław's plan, just to indicate, to identify the ways for the city to go forward. Wrocław is a big city, 700,000 residents, 29 square kilometers. So this is an area that needs a careful, organized, structured management. And so social participation is managed at several levels. First of all, it's the civic budget, the instrument that you will all know, just to identify where to locate, to direct the social initiatives, so as to provide for the equal treatment of all the areas. To make it happen, we had a special fund established, 40 million, covering all the residential areas in Wrocław, so that it's citizens that actually make decisions about where to locate specific initiatives. Then the grants that indicate the specific locations for the greenery. So the social participation tells us that greenery is the key point in as regards the quality of life of the residents. What people protest again is lack of consultation, where they don't have influence on the outcomes of the consultation process, when they are ignored, when the comments or remarks are ignored in the decision making.
W jakiś sposób udaje się znaleźć porozumienie. Braku opieki nad konsultacjami osób decyzyjnych.
They actually deter the lack of support from decision makers. They deter the length of proceeding or waiting for a long time for the outcomes. Then deforestation or cutting down trees is another reason. the questions whether or not to mow the city lawns or not. On the one hand, when we had information from the activists that the lawns shouldn't be moved because it is a direct response to climate change. But on the other hand, we had feedback from citizens that they thought for aesthetic reasons they should be lawned. To give another example, with different projects for revitalization, people don't want for these projects to be pursued at the cost of the existing greeneries. So whether a new pavement, new road is built, people don't want for the existing parks or trees to be removed. So these situations actually arouse conflicts as well. As a city, we respond to this feedback. We actually boost social participation for the protection of greenery. The existing paths through the parks is a common thing, a common view in Poland. So adaptation to social needs, adaptation to the needs of the elderly. Well, we talk about the youth take part most actively in community consultation. It's not the case. It's the elderly that are the most active, perhaps, in this process. So the combined the picture here, with different projects, we create new infrastructure, and this is something valued by citizens. For a couple of years in a row, they would vote for projects like the sports park you can see on the picture here, something that we didn't have before. So a lot of infrastructure that enjoys support, public support. Greenery areas, with the proper management of the rainfall waters, precipitation waters, waste treatment. It takes years to develop such projects like this park tells you. So the social community participation totally goes beyond what's possible. And that's why, the city is forced to cross, the consecutive limits, so to say, to establish greenery areas, and in locations they deemed impossible before, just as you can see in the picture here. That was done in cooperation with the Army Property Agency. We are still in talks with the owners of the post-military areas. So these talks are really difficult, but we do our best. So the micro grants, extend the reach of these initiatives. At times, they are included at a later date in bigger projects. What contributes to that is awareness-raising events over the city, organized projects like Autumn with the Trees, that is getting people out to the parks to learn about the trees, about greeneries. There are more and more greenery establishments being created. There are trees planted in areas previously excluded from greenery management with community participation. This is all kind of widespread education effort that was hardly believable previously, something that was non-existent previously. In the spring this year, the mayor of the city decided not to sell 24 areas previously intended for sales, areas that residents fought for, so people make this happen, make it reality, something that was deemed impossible before. So this is a new approach to the greenery protection. Thank you very much.
Pierwszą rzeczą, jaką sobie zanotowałem w trakcie pani prezentacji.
Thank you. What I have seen in your presentation or heard is the word radical. This is the word I put down. And as a person related to environmental NGOs for many years, I'm particularly glad to hear this kind of word from an official, from a local self-government. So before we move on to questions, also to your presentation, I'd like to give the floor to our guests in the room. We have Katarzyna Przyjemska from Cracow. I'd like to hear from you about what is going on in Kraków, what Cracow in Green means as a project, perhaps in contrast to what we heard about Wrocław a moment ago. Maybe this will be relatively easy to compare these two cities because they have similar potential. But I'd like also to know about the beginnings of the idea of participation in your administration career and how it all started. I mean, co-deciding about the greenery in the city. How did that influence your work? How does that influence your daily work? Well, Kraków and Wrocław have much in common. We cooperate at many layers, and we have very positive results. Best practice from Wrocław has always been very inspiring. I hope vice versa. So we do not compete, we support each other. I wish every Polish city in Poland to have such partners countrywide. My career as a bureaucrat started when we established the Office of Greenery Management in the municipality, and I was at the beginning to set up a team of people, in fact, focused on residents and listening to residents. So this was kind of a pioneering project, although I must admit we were inspired by Łódź, by the city of Łódź and an organization from Łódź, not official, not administration, but an NGO. So what we try to do is we keep raising people's awareness that you can walk on grass, which wasn't so obvious at the beginning of our work. You remember these infamous boards saying, "Don't walk on the grass, keep away from the grass." And we decided to invite people, walk on the grass. And what followed was the visit of the Pope and thousands of people from the whole world coming to Cracow for youth days. And we started to encourage them, please walk on the grass, enjoy the greenery. Besides, we started a number of educational activities. We started a unit called Symbiosis. It's an educational center. I'm also part of the leading team. And we also watch people's behavior and how this behavior or habits change. Broadly speaking, the whole trends in keeping greenery. There's a huge work behind that in terms of awareness raising because of climate adaptation needs. And I remember first consultations while developing new parks in Kraków, actually 2 new parks. And we involved the residents very much. That was really the very beginning of consultation of greenery in Kraków. because we had just started operation as a municipal unit.
Więc my jednocześnie
So,
poprzez te procesy
through
pokazywaliśmy mieszkańcom
this participatory process, we tried to show inhabitants what it is like, how you should do it, how you should go about it. Now this is a standard. Of course, it can be improved, it can be upgraded. And I think we all should ask ourselves this question, whether everything should be put to consultation. Like Monika said, there is also space for debate. There is space for argument. And like, for example, between history or monument protection officers and people dealing with green designs. So that was more or less the beginning of my adventure with green issues in the city. And back then, I remember that work was relatively easy. Our unit was like several dozen people. Now it's more than 200 people, and the number of projects is growing rapidly. And in fact, the whole idea of consultation and project making has changed. There are many projects, many investment projects at a different scale, from these kind of pocket-sized parks to very large parks, and this is getting more and more complex. But on the other hand, inhabitants are more and more aware, and they are more and more eager to join in, to co-decide, and of course they are critical as well. And this is for various reasons, including political reasons. We must remember that if you look at what is going on the internet, it's not only about struggle for more greenery. There is a lot of political stuff and trolling, so it's different. But what we agree about is we should listen to residents. If you don't listen to residents, if you don't allow them to have a voice, they will be discouraged, and it's very difficult to get them back. And there's one more aspect I wanted to mention. It's really difficult to involve everyone. There are many people very active online, but there is a big group of people who don't participate, who don't want to be part of this online storm. And what we see sometimes seems like only a slice of the reality. And this is challenging, to reach as many people as possible when you want to communicate something, when you want to invite people to participate. It's really hard to get people to do something. We live in a rush, we have our own business, daily stuff, and many residents don't even realize what is going on around in their district, what participation is, and even if they know, they don't feel like being part of it. And then, when the project is over, they complain that they were not heard. Well, thank you for sharing. Referring to what you said at the end of your talk, and we heard it also from Wrocław, so perhaps keeping that in mind, what we heard, maybe I should ask Hanna, my colleague from Lublin, can you perhaps reflect a bit on participation, public participation in green management projects? You spoke about people who protest, what it is like in Lublin, whose voice is heard and whose not. So far, we have focused more on people who are active participants, who do take care of greenery, who even lobby for greenery, for nature. But
jest grupa
We-
mieszkańców, która
We can't ignore the fact that there is a group of people,
to są te same osoby.
even sometimes
W pewnych sytuacjach ma
the same
inne
people all the
interesy
time,
i ta-
who have different
ta
business,
zieleń,
different interests,
nie
and
stoi dla nich, na
greenery
pierwszym miejscu
is not a
w
priority,
przestrzeni
to
publicznej,
say the least.
artykułowaniu swoich potrzeb, więc
And they do not articulate
proszę panią
a
dyrektor
need
o,
for
refleksję,
greenery that clearly.
lubelską.
So, Director, can we hear about the Lublin perspective?
Dziękuję.
Thank you for giving me the floor. Good afternoon again. So, a few words of introduction. I want to thank all speakers, all participants, including those online, for being here. I'm really impressed with your presentations. I'm really very happy to hear that. I do my best to remember all that and learn from you. We are very different cities indeed. We have very different experience, but on the other hand, there are similarities. In Lublin, everything started with the participatory budget, with the citizens' budget, but this budget, in a way, proved not so efficient in terms of green projects. Many green projects failed. Many green projects gave way to construction projects, so roads, parking lots, open-air gyms, sometimes called plazas or parks, but without any greenery, only the equipment for exercise. So, Mr. Mayor
na tyle dla nas łaskawy, że poświęcił
was flexible enough to offer 2 million zlotys a year for the so-called green budget, and this green budget is only allocated to greenery projects. The ideas that come in are many and various, and not every project can be implemented because this amount of money is not excessive.
Wrócę jednak do tego stwierdzenia, że nawet ogródek
But even a pocket-sized garden needs to have some pavement, some bench, or something where you can sit. The greenery itself is not enough, and residents sometimes register needs for developing spaces where they can meet, where they can really be. So they need to walk on something or sit on something. So out of all projects we receive, after some initial evaluation, we select those that fit into the framework of or the policy of a specific district or housing estate, and also residents' proposals, but they are also verified by our experts. These people are not officials, they are external experts. But of course we want the applicants, the local people, to be really part of this. So for many editions of these green budgets, we also ran the so-called aesthetics program, where NGOs helped people develop different green concepts, green designs, almost ready-made designs that can be implemented. Because, you know, local people sometimes don't know certain technicalities or what functions should be met or how to design things. So it was, you know, the concept work was done by residents, experts, and NGOs helped put it into a specific design. So it was internal, external consultation in the field. So more and more and better projects were submitted for the budget. So I really see eye to eye with our guests from Cracow that sometimes you just need to think whether everything needs to be consulted and to what extent. But of course, there's no future without consultation. This is absolutely necessary. it is difficult to find compromise. We have examples where it seemed like everyone agreed, everyone wanted to do something, and even at a very advanced stage, there is a group that opposes, that was not active before and suddenly came out of the blue to protest. So the cities differ in terms of size, but I think we face similar challenges. There are always active people who will always want to say something, and those who want good, they're not so visible.
Jest tendencja do krytykowania.
And if you look at the social media, at the internet, people tend to criticize. There is more criticism online than positive feedback. And at the level of implementation, different groups just crawl out of the woodwork and they stop everything, and it's hard to find compromise so that everybody's happy. Actually, there are no projects like this where everybody's happy. There will be always someone criticizing, and usually they are the loudest groups. So, in fact, we have more and more green areas, there are more and more plantings, we have figures, we have statistics to prove that, but of course there will be some to criticize. This is too little. Some will say this is too much, so you will never satisfy everyone. Perhaps I'd like also to hear from you, because we want to also learn from you as a city of a smaller size, but with similar problems. So before I give the floor to the room, to the audience, so please scribble down your questions. We have also one question on the chat from one of the viewers. This is a question to Mariia. You were talking about working in the countryside of Ukraine. The question is, could you tell us, can you give us maybe a comparison, the differences between urban space with high-rising buildings and countryside and rural areas? You showed an example of a school where you were working on some exhibition and the area around. Is there a difference of working with rural communities and city communities? Are the mechanisms, tools the same? Do you approach these two communities in the same way?
Yeah, thank you for the question. One thing I should mention is that in my practice, I'm talking only about those communities I've met, rural communities are eager to celebrate small results more, I guess. So even if one step is done, for example, we collected, let's say, 300 zloty, just as an example, they will celebrate it. And I guess citizens of like big cities, they expect from themselves more, and therefore maybe it's harder for them to keep going and keep implementing the projects because they expect more from themselves and they think that others expect more, and they have more cities to compare with. But that's only my guess, only my feeling. I didn't make a research on that, okay? Yeah, and another point, what differs is maybe attitude towards space and towards green zones, because when we worked with a community in a really small village, we felt that they didn't have that attitude as we do, because we like the NGO workers, we came from a big city where we value every flower, every tree and everything. And for rural community, they want infrastructure. Like, give us some beton. We want of course, roads. Then we want some covering for having some dances, and we understood it. But we really faced up this difference in the attitude. So maybe I can mention this.
Tak, i dziękuję za tą odpowiedź. I korzystając z obecności na naszym...
Thank you very much for your response. We have Mr. Zurab from Georgia who spoke about the experience of the whole region. I don't know the region. I didn't have a chance to visit Georgia, but I imagine this region also has cities and rural areas and villages. From your perspective, are there any differences in working with people from rural areas in Georgia and working with people from the cities in Georgia as regards greeneries? Of course there is a difference. I would rephrase that question. Well, for our region, the priority over the years I worked in the region was close cooperation with people, so that they become aware of the problems, that they grow in this direction. With the social support, we established social participation or community participation academies in the cities, where our workers, our people, and representatives of city authorities and local governments, they took part. So first, in these forums, we developed the priorities for the redevelopment or revitalization of the region. And after that, after the expert consultation, we went out to meet with the people, to consult with people, both in cities and rural areas. So today, we can say that we have succeeded in getting people to decide over their own matters, to pick up the priorities, their own initiatives. And we had some 30 projects like these, the grassroots projects funded from the program, both in the cities and in the countryside. Mind you, Guria is a mountainous region, so the classification it is mainly between lowlands and highlands, and we are working on the prioritization of the rural areas. Of course, they have different perspectives, but so we are working on these projects just now in rural areas. When we started this work and started to explain that what's normal for them today will be a problem tomorrow, first of all, they opposed, but over time, they succeeded in changing their attitudes. They saw that we were eager and honest in working with them. So mind you, it takes time, but without participation of people, it's really hard to talk about any successes, any achievements. So we spent 3 years to make people aware of the concerns, of the problems, and to kind of reach this level of awareness about green areas that would allow joint efforts to go further. So today we can say that the consortium uniting different organizations, social organizations, NGOs, working with us, can speak in a single voice, can present their ideas to the authorities. They propose new legislative solutions as well. Now there's a heated debate over the new legal amendments so that the city, the activists can have a say as regards the development or the management of the national parks. So we work with people to make them active or involved, at least involved, to be aware what they need, of what they need. So it's a matter of them seeing on their own that by the grassroots initiative they can establish a new forested area, a new park. That the funds will go to finance this initiative, that they can attract people from the neighboring regions, neighboring the cities, that they can work together to plant a new park, plant trees in a new park. Then when you look at this, I think that we have succeeded. We have pursued a new project that people used to think as, well, impossible, totally impossible before. But now, when they can feel the outcomes, that they can go to the parks, that they can breathe in the fresh air in there, they are now convinced that natural conservatorship pays off, that it's really worthwhile protecting your own resources. So I can say now that the more you talk to people, the more they will understand and the more they will support us in what we do.
Dziękuję za odpowiedź.
Thank you very much for this opinion. And now let's have questions from the audience. Please, all the attendees are at your disposal now. Please ask your questions. I include also those online guests who are with us. Mr. Councillor was the first one with the question.
Jest prośba o podejście do mikrofonu.
Could you please come to the stage to reach the microphone so that everyone can hear us?
Dziękuję bardzo.
Thank you very much.
Słychać. Ja tutaj tak w kontekście wypowiedzi
the context
pani
of
dyrektor Hanny Pawlikowskiej,
Mrs. Director Hanna Pawlikowska, who at some point said that
nigdy nie można nikomu do końca dogodzić, jeśli chodzi o te
never
działania.
will everyone be pleased with
Tak, może najpierw taki
the greenery-related areas. So just to give you some history over that, I think,
z moich obserwacji,
from my observation, it seems that
zieleni, nazwijmy to tak w
the
skrócie, zostały powołane przez
Greenspace authorities appointed by the city authorities as a kind of fashion that came to us from the West, I would say. But I think that these Greenspace authorities were not rooted in social awareness, so to say. And that's why, that's because I don't see any consistency between what the cities themselves do.
Nawiązując do tego, co powiedziałem,
Well, just again, to give you some history.
Czyli tak, konflikt
There's a conflict mainly between construction developers, that is the entities who want to cater for the residential needs of the community that were historically neglected. And now what comes into play is the fashion not to get developed for residential purposes, but just to get some balance in this. So my point is, I think as a councillor that there should be a policy in place, because after all, this is the city council is for, or the councillors board is for. There are some grassroots proposals, grassroots projects. We have a special authority appointed to that end, but it keeps, being kind of a partisan effort. There's no, a single direction. There's no proper consistency, no proper cohesion in these activities. So what's your opinion about that? How can we get out of this clinch, of this, standstill, given that we all need green areas? So perhaps we should adopt some rules, for instance, that in urban space there should be this and that percentage of green areas, and that's it. As for Kraków, this Kamionki area, I think, where construction developers wanted to build it up. There was a conflict and social protests, against that. We have similar problems as the city of Lublin. It's a long story, but okay, what's your opinion about that? Thank you very much for this compromise. It's good that I'm not answering this question, so let's start from Cracow. I think that these problems are faced by all the cities, so we are not an exception as Lublin. But let me just rectify what you said. Greenspace authority was established at the clear demand of the community. So it's not a top-down decision. It's the grassroots demand that was met, and the city simply, had to comply. So we started doing, and what you named the partisan effort, this is precisely community participation. And this cooperation, which is not easy, as we all said, does not show you that the city doesn't know what it's doing, but it shows you that it's trying to involve people, to involve communities. And of course, we have guidelines, we have procedures, we have rules as Krakow cities. There's, the directions for the development of green areas. It's an official document that provides for the spatial zoning plans and the preliminary plans, gives us specific indicators, what areas should be protected, what areas are the most important, how the city should manage and develop the green areas. So it's not that the city doesn't know where to go. Perhaps at the national level that are missing, for the cities to be able to impose certain requirements on the construction developers or intervene, in private property owners. With Lex Shishko, perhaps the best example for that. So it's not as you say it is.
Mariia?
Yeah, thank you for your question. If I understood you right, you made a point that these agendas were brought here from West, and we can call it fashion. And I would rather disagree with it from a historical point of view, even if considering us here being post-Soviet, like post-socialist, post-USSR countries, we may mention that even in those times there were practices of going from some institutions and planting some trees and planting some flowers. Even kids with their teachers were taken to plant some parks. I'm pretty sure that happens not only in Kiev, not only in Ukraine, but in other post-Soviet cities as well. And this is the main point. So we had same practice where when people took part in real planting something, but we didn't have it then that people made decisions about how they wanted it to look like or how to use these territories. And this is what I guess we here try to develop more, that people not only make their own little gardens, but that they can somehow impact the development of larger territories.
Dziękuję. Pani dyrektor?
Thank you very much for for this, and let me just perhaps clarify any misunderstandings there might have been from my the speech. When I spoke about conflicts, or I spoke about situations where the greenery area or location is identified. And now we are talking about the functions, that is, specific directions of development. Now, some want, an area for walking dogs. Some want, a pavement through the greenery part, and some want simply a meadow, not to be mowed down. So this is the conflict I was thinking about. And these areas in the zoning plan are intended for greenery. We have all the formal and official approvals, and the conflict is arises between the citizens themselves. They simply cannot agree on specific matters.
Pani Moniki,
I have a question to Monika, and I'd like to know Wrocław's perspective. Would you like to take this question from the room? I mean, green management came from a fashion, or what about creating dedicated units in a municipality for that? Well, agreed, the greening of cities is a trend, but this is to the benefit of the greenery and residents. We can reduce spatial chaos because of that, and most Polish cities suffer from that. And referring to this question, there is a strategic document. This is environmental impact assessment, and in local spatial development plans, there is such a huge development provided for that will offer accommodation to 18 million Poles, which means within a couple of years, the number of population in Poland should be growing by 50%. This is the impression you can get when you read these documents. And these spatial plans also permit 10 or more thousand residents extra in some of Wrocław's areas. There has never been in the history of Wrocław this kind of situation when the number of population grew so rapidly. So, of course, if you look at rehabilitation of specific areas or housing estates, it has some negative aspect to it, like betonoza in Polish, so concretization of cities. But the other thing is about protection. The role of municipal green units is to justify certain greening action. And what the lady from Lublin said, also the question how we shape this space, how we shape landscape to make it beautiful. So even when we intervene, this intervention should be aligned with aesthetics, with people's needs. So during social consultation, sometimes people want to put 20 different functions in one park, for dogs, for seniors, skate parks. And so if we agree to that, there will be very little space for shrubs, for greenery, for beautiful layouts and complexes.
mieliśmy do czynienia wcześniej, przed budżetami partycypacyjnymi.
that we actually had before participatory budgets.
Obraz, który został stworzony i pozostawiony przez naszych poprzedników dla przyszłych pokoleń.
But of course we have to, this is the other leg, we have to take care of what we have to keep it for future generations. Director, from your Georgian perspective, would you like to take this question from the room?
Плохо слышно было. Да, на тему зелени вот выступал депутат городской думы сейчас.
Well, yes, as regards greenery, I'd like to refer to that question from the room. We face similar questions here at home, and even there was a law enacted not so long ago that gives local governments separate powers to make their own decisions as regards spatial development. And this law provides very precise guidelines as to what percentage or what share of a specific area should be occupied by housing developments, by parks, by greenery in general. So this is a major change, how to lay out space in terms of residential, commercial and other functions. Of course, for such planning, local residents are involved too. Because sometimes some rules are violated or bent, and we have established a group, actually volunteers, who often participate in different development initiatives. They, in a sense, supervise or monitor whether these rights are properly exercised. For example, they noticed one construction company who they wanted to interfere with the river in the city. They wanted to exploit some construction materials from nearby, and they started to dig in the river to extract construction material. They were digging too deep, so these voluntary groups took some photos, made a video, and we reported it to our services, and they stopped that work. So when there is some link, some cooperation or exchange of information between authorities and the local people, this really works, because it is people who elect their representatives. They expect these representatives to listen to them and follow ideas and projects that people would like to see. This is how we can prevent certain problems now and in the future. We have several projects in place, for example, animal shelters with special greenery, so protected areas in a sense. People are also getting involved. We would like to distribute young trees and shrubs to plant, for people to plant around the house or in their own land. This is distributed for free, and this is to make up for all the losses in greenery that our region has suffered. This is where our main focus goes now, and we take it very seriously. So the local government and the people must really tackle these challenges together. Well, we have another question from the room, please.
Dzień dobry, nazywam się Andrzej Kunt, jestem burmistrzem małego miasta.
Andrzej Kut. I'm a mayor of a small town, Kostrzyn, close to German border. We have come 700 kilometers here. So because we are at the border, we are interested in cross-border cooperation, including investment in greenery. I very much like this subject. I'm happy to be part of this discussion. And because I'm an old guy and a very old mayor, I have to speak about budget. So I have a very pragmatic approach. We live in times when it's relatively easy to make an investment project, whether this is setting up a park or something. We do it like everywhere. But we know very well that every investment creates certain expenses. So the problem is not to start and complete a project, to get funding, to get a credit. This is, say, relatively easy. But later on, you have to maintain what you have done. You have to keep it in good shape. So you haven't touched on this problem before, and we all know, and I spoke to the mayor of Kraków a few days ago. I know the city's income is going down. They have millions of zlotys less in the budget than in the previous years. This is more or less the problem across the country. And I know that our income basically is growing, but expenses are growing too, and even faster. So, practically speaking, do you see any threat in future projects because of excessive expenses to keep these projects later on? So, the question is, build? Yes, build, but what next? Okay, so Cracow was mentioned here. Would you like to hear from, or maybe we would like to hear from everyone? So let's start with Cracow. Well, we did speak about it before our meeting, and later on with Hanna. It is a challenge indeed. We keep lobbying, and we started when our unit was established. We keep lobbying for more expenses per square meter of greenery, and it must grow in proportion to the size of new green areas. And jokingly speaking, we cut the grass less often because this is an overall trend to leave grass as it is. But I remember in 2016, we had a conference with several partner cities and Edinburgh, Scotland, and an expert from Edinburgh was telling fancy stories about they don't cut anymore, they use sheep. They use sheep to manage grass. And we thought to ourselves, what a crazy guy, what an idea. Today we have changed our mind. But now, more seriously, there are certain trends that, in a way, align with our knowledge about climate change and how we should address climate change to protect the earth. But this is something that residents should be really get used to or should be accustomed to. I mean, if you remember what Monika showed in the presentation, some say, don't cut the grass. The others say, please cut the grass because dogs get ticks, and that's the only benefit of that high grass. But if you look at biodiversity in general and certain solutions that are more and more popular in greenery management, if I may take a step back, when we started as a green management unit, one of the first initiatives was a series of meetings with residents where we tried to promote solutions such as pocket-sized plazas and squares or playgrounds that were really revolutionary back then, because we were promoting ideas like playgrounds made of wood and string. So people didn't believe this could work, but now we can see it does work. So we should help residents imagine certain solutions that may work and should be reported, should be submitted in a participatory budget, solutions that they have never seen, they have never seen anywhere. And this is all about education, like, you know, telling people that dead leaves should be there, that grass doesn't have to be cut. This is new to people, but we have to keep speaking about it, because this, in a sense, contributes to sustainable development and closed-loop economy that our colleague from Georgia mentioned. And this saves some money, but not that much, as many people think. Can we have, yeah, please?
I wish I knew more about budgeting, really. And I wish I knew better how to preserve some money and how to make lots of money for lots of greenings. Yeah, no, not yet. And thank you for the question. It was really interesting to hear other colleagues' perspective and what I may comment from my perspective as from like a small NGOs with huge ambitions, is that we really believe in community building. Because sometimes what city government cannot do, people can do. And we have many more and less efficient examples of when people united and when people were aimed to have garden right over here, they can manage it. For example, even our garden, which is called Heavenly 100 Garden, it was like no place in a very central part of the city. I mean, you can imagine how the land cost over there. It's like 4 minutes from the main square, and now it's a garden. And people could do it. So therefore, we really believe that if we unite community and if we spread the knowledge about different instruments, sometimes people and networking can really do a great job.
Dziękuję. Czy reszta naszych panelistów, panelistek chce odnieść się do...
Are there any speakers who want to address the comment? Monika, I see you are raising your hand.
Do mnie było pytanie, ponieważ mikrofon pan nie włączył i nie wiem.
That wasn't a question. No one switched on the microphone. The question is, would you like to comment on that or respond to Mr. Meyer's question? Well, the investment in infrastructure will definitely increase the level of cost. And I compared the relationship between current investment levels in Poland and Germany. It was shocking to me to learn that in Germany the investment is 20% of the budget, and 80% of the budget is maintenance. And it's just the reverse in Poland. And of course, it's quite certain that we'll have the maintenance cost going forward, and we'll have a problem. So this question just strengthen my position that when protecting what we have, without expanding the infrastructure that will generate costs, but basing our activities on natural solutions like unmowed lawns, unmowed meadows, specific habitats rather than green walls that need watering. Specific species of shrubs and bushes to provide for more natural, for more wild greeneries will actually limit the costs in the future. So eco solutions can be cost effective as well, and that's why they are likable. That's why they should be likable. Just to add to what Mariia said, in fact, in Western Europe, we can see a pronounced trend where in certain shared good or common good areas, citizens act together and they take on responsibilities and costs from the cities in exchange for the freedom to act. And absolutely, this is this should be supported, and I would encourage the cities to do so. I remember last year we organized a conference, New Life Habitat, that was about the protection and maintenance of certain cost-effective green areas. What's required is the effort or input from the citizens. So the important thing is that the community is being built around such areas. Of course, there may be some municipal property given to the community. It's a bit more difficult, but it's possible. But I think that what's missing, especially in Kraków, that's for sure, and perhaps on the Poland nationwide scale. What we are missing is NGOs that would provide the background or the kind of being a supporter, but a wise supporter, being able to criticize as well, criticize constructively. So we need to support the NGOs as well, to give them the chance, opportunity to operate effectively. And this is a plea, an appeal to the mayors present in the audience. Please support the NGOs that you have under your responsibility and activate them to action. As for greeneries, citizens do not often have the options to organize themselves. Kraków give them, give the unorganized groups of neighbors, for example, the opportunity to act, but it's not the case with all the cities. So please support these people, support these NGOs to give everyone the chance to operate. Yeah, let me add a few words on my part. So, of course, the size of the greeneries or the new plantings and the maintenance entails costs. So, of course, the functions that these areas play are underestimated, and the benefits are overestimated, and the benefits are underestimated. So I have a department manager in here. So when we first suggested that the lawns should not be mowed, we were misunderstood completely, and that was the end of the discussion in the department. But as you can see, the awareness is evolving, is changing, and as Mr. Councillor said, yes, it's fashionable now, it's trendy, it's jazzy. So I think that we are at the stage of not only the community participation, but the first step of community participation in maintenance, in the care for these areas. So within a couple of years, the understanding will grow, the support from citizens will grow, I hope, and the situation will change simply. Thank you very much. I think that this panel discussion is heading towards the end time. Thank you very much for your contributions, for the answers to the questions. I didn't manage to ask my questions. I noted that, but let me share some thoughts over the last speeches, the last statements. In the presentations, Mariia, you mentioned or raised the problems of managing the areas that are not managed yet. And this element combines with the kind of cost efficiency of the management of the greeneries. And it fits into the discussion held in expert circles, in NGOs, whether or not every greenery, every green area should be managed or not. What should we expect? What should we drive at? Perhaps we should leave these areas kind of wild, accessible to all the wild animals, even in the city centers. So this is food for thought for every one of us. Thank you very much for your speeches, for your contributions. Thank you for online guests for being with us. I would like to thank organizers for having this session during the Congress. And now, please let me hand over to Krzysztof Stanowski.
Bardzo pięknie dziękuję.
Thank you very much for this discussion, for this talk. I was born in Lublin, and I nearly remember that back in the 60s, where the residential communities were allocated apartments of flats a year in advance. The future, the would-be residents were invited to a meeting, and they were given seedlings, the new plants, and encouraged to plant the green areas. So it was back in the 60s when I was a very young boy. But there are experiences that we can derive benefits from.